Okay, welcome everybody to the Red Thread Chat. I'm looking really forward today to this conversation. There's sometimes where you meet someone and you just feel calm, you feel a grounding energy. And while we didn't get to meet in person, we did have a phone conversation, and I really just kind of picked up on your vibration and really resonated with that. So, kind of that's what today's guest brings. And I'm hoping today that Alana Tracy is going to enlighten a lot of us about what sound can do. She's a healer, a guide, and someone who truly holds space in the most beautiful way through her breath work, through her sound work, energy work, and her sacred ceremonies. She helps people to reconnect with themselves and to step into their power. But what I love most is that her work isn't just about technique, it's not just things she's read. These things come from something born deep within her own journey of pain, grief, and healing. And she's taken everything that she's been through and she's turned it into something purposeful. And today she's here to share it with us. So, Alana, I'm so happy to have you here today.
I am so happy to be here with you today. I feel so incredibly blessed. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I guess we're just going to go ahead and start. You've walked such a profound journey from trauma and grief to finding your calling in the healing arts. Can you share with the audience a little bit about your own story? And that could be as much or as little as you want, but just give us a little bit of background of what led you to the path and how did your own experiences shape the way that you work today?
So, basically, from a very young age, I um, I came from a family where there was a lot of addiction and abuse and a lot of uncertainty. And so I learned to really just take a deep breath at a really young age and, put my hands on my heart. And whenever I felt scared or unsure, I would just say things like, I'm going to be okay, or I am good, or I would just take a deep breath and know that God was with me and protecting me, and that I was going to be fine as long as I kept connection to spirit and my higher source. And that was happening to me at a very, very young age.
Well, that's interesting. So from there, you kind of devoted your life to helping other people heal and to aligning with their higher selves through breath work, through sound and energy. If you had to sum up, I guess, your mission of how you're trying to help people in a sentence, what would that be? What is it that you want to offer to people that come in to see you with your work?
So, my mission is basically to create a sacred and safe space where people can feel heard, where people can feel seen, and where people allow themselves to just be, basically. So many of us have gone through life just feeling small or feeling like we don't matter or feeling like, we're broken. And I just want to remind you that you are in no way broken. You are in no way damaged. You may just be disconnected. Disconnected from yourself, disconnected from your body, disconnected from source, disconnected from God, disconnected from your spirituality. And I truly believe that is why we have so much anxiety in this world, because we're disconnected. And so, what I am trying to do is have a space, bring a space where people can come and feel calm and comfortable and seen and loved and held.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, you talk about that and you talk about society and you talk about conditioning and, all of the things kind of that we've been through, and everybody's different. I was a more sensitive individual. Some people aren't quite as sensitive, but kind of what you're talking about is just being overwhelmed. And then somewhere along the line, we kind of get lost. We um, disconnect, like you said. We lose contact with source and who we are in our hearts. So I think the heart is an interesting thing in what you're talking about, because it sounds like that's where it's coming from with you, that you have this love and that you have this compassion in your heart. You said your path kind of chose you, that it wasn't really a decision that you made, that it was kind of like this calling, that came to you. So I'm interested, when did you get that first nudge, that whisper that said there's something more to Alana Tracy than whatever it was you were doing before, and that you were meant to share your gift with others?
So again, at a very young age, I was the type of kid who people would tell their problems to.
Mm,
And I think I was very intuitive to people's emotions. And so I would um, approach someone who seemed to, need a hug or a smile or just a kind word. And even like at the grocery store or wherever I was, people would just start kind of telling me about their problems or what was going on in their life. And I always felt so much compassion and so much empathy. And I just felt like we needed more love. We needed more compassion. We needed more empathy. We needed to hold space for people. And of course, at that age, I didn't know that's what it was, holding space. And I came from a family where sort of like kindness was weakness, or you had to have this sort of tough exterior at all times, and you had to be cool, and you didn't want to let anyone know what you were feeling or thinking. And that just really never like resonated with me, even as much as I tried, or I wanted to put up that that wall, that barrier, that armor. And I think there was a time when I did do that. But I knew it wasn't me. It really wasn't. And I had some situations where people who were extremely close to me passed, much too young, tragic circumstances. And I remember just kind of having this epiphany that I was not doing what I was put on here to do, and that life is short, and really all we have is this moment right now, just right now. And being grounded in presence and gratitude is the thing I think that has driven me to do what I want to do, what I need to do, what I feel God has put me here to do. And just being thankful for this beautiful journey, even with the heartache, even with the pain, even with the things that that caused me a lot of heartache and pain and tears. Um, I just felt like this was the time for me to be who I was meant to be.
yeah, it's interesting. You talk about that, and I'm always amazed. I think I felt certain things as a kid. I think I was intuitive in certain ways, but I don't think I ever kind of put those things together. The last few years, I started to kind of recognize that something was going on, but it wasn't something that, I mean, it is something I could say I felt, because as a kid, I just knew, like you said, this isn't it. This, the way that these people are acting, I came from an extremely disciplined childhood. My stepfather was a Marine. And so everything was, just do it, do it, do it now, snap the quarter off your bed and XYZ. And like I said, and my biological father was very analytical. So here I was, kind of this emotional child in these structures that just didn't seem to make sense. And so I always find it fascinating when someone at a younger age kind of understands that process of like, look, something is different here and there's something that I need to do. So when would you say it was? Like, at what age? I'm not talking about when you felt it, or after you'd felt it a few times, but at what point did you decide this is it? I'm taking that leap, and I'm going to use the rest of my life to do this type of work.
So I want to say it was a slow journey, but I kind of remember a moment in 2010, and my dear friend had passed, and I was in a lot of grief, and I was just not really sure what I was going to do. And I was a real estate agent, and the crash had happened, I believe, in like 2008, and
Mhm.
just a lot of things. And I just kind of remember looking at my husband and just looking at him and saying, I'm going on a spiritual journey, and I hope you come with me. And I didn't really know what I was talking about or what that really meant, you know? And but I can say, because when I was younger, um I did meditation, and I did yoga, and in yoga there's pranayama, which is breath work, and it's interesting. The sound has always been interesting because I grew up, singing in church choir, and being in bands and singing, with my husband, and so it's kind of really naturally, when you think about it, kind of came together, the fact that I do breath work and sound healing. It's like it's kind of a, no-brainer when you think about it. But these journeys, we have to go through them. And so I think in around then, that's kind of when I really just decided that I was going to commit my life to this. I didn't know what it looked like, I didn't know it was going to be breath work and sound healing. I didn't know if it was going to be yoga or meditation. I really didn't know anything, but I knew that I was going to commit to this. I was going to commit to my healing journey, and that I was going to help others as well. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I can tell you right now that I just listened. I
Mhm.
really just listened, and I allowed myself to be still. It wasn't about hustling or doing, or, I have to get this done. It was just about sort of surrendering to God, you know, and saying, look, I am a vessel. Allow me to be who I need to be to serve as many people as I can, to love themselves, to accept themselves, to give themselves grace. So many of us are so hard on ourselves. And so I would say that's probably when I sort of made the declaration that this is what I'm going to do. But it has been a journey, and it has taken a long time, and we've had so many things happen. But I am so blessed to say that at this point in my life, I am able to do this on a full-time basis.
That's fantastic. I mean, you said a lot there, and there's, you know, I I think to myself, it's interesting because what does it look like to go on a spiritual journey? Well, it doesn't look like selling real estate, right? I mean, when you look at those things, and it always seems to be the same. We sort of go through our life. We learn in school we have to do a particular thing. I just did a video on this. We learn we have to do a particular thing. We get a piece of paper. We go out. We get kind of into that little cubicle, and we do that thing. And then somewhere at some point, it can't be contained anymore, and it just looks so radically different than whatever it was that we were doing before, right? And it's
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. And you don't know what it's going to bring. I mean, I was in a time of grief. I was struggling. I was depressed. I was not feeling well. I just remember just kind of, my career had kind of gone away. People close to me had passed on, and I was very, very lost. And I always found this interesting that God put me to work at a comedy club, of all places. it seems so crazy, right? But when I think about it, when I look back now, and I thought, what am I doing here? I never thought I would be going back to this service industry in that capacity ever. But when I think about it, I was like, oh, I know why he put me in a comedy club. I understand why Source was like, okay, this is what you're going to do. It allowed me to focus on what I needed to focus on and work on what I needed to focus on. And with all the heaviness and sadness that I was feeling, I was in a comedy club. And so slowly but surely, it was very good for me. And I believe that God put me there for a reason to kind of help me heal my soul, to help me heal myself so I could serve others.
Yeah, I mean, again, like you said, it's interesting because or as I was saying as well, we're sort of going through this process. We have this label put on job, career, whatever it is, and then all of these tower moments have to happen, right? All of these things. It's like no matter if we wanted to or not, something was going to change. And so you talked about the collapse and the real estate, the housing bubble, and again, the career that we have, the thing that we think we're supposed to do, all of a sudden that starts to come down, and it just opens something up for you to create a different space. And I love the fact that like you said, it's part of that cosmic joke, right? Which is like, I know, and I know you think what's going to happen, but here's where you need to be. This is what needs to happen. And that all works together for that highest good, for where you are. And like you said, working with breath and sound, let's go a little bit deep here, because I am interested. I brought you on because you do work with sound and energy, and I want to learn, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to learn, what is the connection between the two, sound and energy, and how does sound actually move energy in the body, or even in a space, and how can we use that, through, we talked a little bit before this, through music, through our voice, or even the silence. How can we learn to utilize sound as a tool in this world in order for us to find a little bit more peace, if that's what we're looking for, but if we're looking to go deeper, how to heal?
So, Breath and Sound, that is the name of my company, very simple. And this is why. So, breath is our life force, right? And even, I'm sure you remember forever people would be just take a deep breath.
Mm,
There's so much truth in that. Just take a deep breath. Our breath brings us back into the present moment, like that. When you do intentional breath work, it can bring you into the present, which again is all we have. Sound is vibration. Sound is energy, and we are vibration. We are energy, and it carries a frequency, and that frequency can surpass our minds and
mm,
go straight into our bodies, allowing the vibration to sort of wash over us. And it's been proven it can help us to release trauma. It can help us to release stuck energy in our bodies. And the breath can do the same thing. And so together, there's such a powerful, powerful tool. It's a powerful combination to use breath work and sound healing together to get us into this moment, into the present, and really get us into our bodies and get us out of our mind of that spinning always, always. What do we need to do? The 500 emails I have, text messages I have to return. What am I going to make for dinner? The laundry is piling up. And just these sacred spaces that I create, 1 hour of self-care can do so much. And a lot of people, they release tears or crying, or they don't understand why they feel lighter. And you don't need to understand, because you're just releasing old baggage, old trauma, old ideas that don't even serve you anymore. We grow up with all of these ideas, like you said, we grew up with shame and guilt that doesn't even belong to us. And it's just here, stuck. And
Mhm.
through breath and through sound, we can release those energies. We can release that and really make room to bring in what we would like to bring into our lives.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this series and to talk with different types of practitioners is because I kind of realized that for the majority of my life, I was just running on autopilot. We were just kind of conditioned to deal with the stress. The more important the job, the more stress that comes with it, right? But that's not really true. It's just what we've been conditioned kind of to believe. You have to work, hard days work for a hard day's pay, just all these different types of things. And in today's society, it's gotten worse and worse. When I was growing up, my mother, she was home all day, so we always had a parent that was there. We always had some form of support. But as time goes on, everybody has to work. Everybody's running around. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody's got 50 emails, 100 emails, whatever it is. So again, like you're talking, like I was saying, I wanted to give people sort of some new modalities to kind of open up, because not some people may not know about any of these things. They're just like you said, going through their life, carrying a kid in one arm, trying to cook with the other, answering the phone, the tea kettle's whistling, somebody's at the front door, kids need help with the homework. And by the time you drop into your bed, I mean, you're just completely exhausted. You haven't cultivated your garden. You've used every resource in it. And that can just be so draining. So let's stick here with energy for a moment. People say that, truth, love, and even the spirit inside of us, it carries a particular frequency. Like there's a tangible, measurable vibration. What's your experience with this? And can we use sound and frequencies and things like this to, I mean, you said it already that we can, but in what ways, in what tangible ways could you give people to begin starting these practices if they wanted to do so?
Well, first of all, so healing isn't something that we force, right? Healing is something that we allow. And I believe that breath and sound are the invitation for that. So even it doesn't, you don't have to take an hour, you don't have to have some big meditation practice where you're like, for, an hour. It can literally be 3 breaths. You can sit. Put your hands on your heart, feel that vibration, right? And just breathe in, literally breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. You do it 3 times, you're going to feel a shift,
Yeah.
right? Like that's just the way it is. And then you add sound to it, and it can really just take you elsewhere just for those few moments to connect, to connect to yourself, to connect to God, right? And
Yeah.
so now there's clarity. You have space for your truth to land. But when we're constantly going, 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 we can't hear it, we can't feel it, we're disconnected. So breath and sound is a wonderful way, and you don't really need to go anywhere. You can just have a sound bowl and ding the sound bowl. Um I have a sound bowl right here, and you just that moment, you feel so much better.
Yeah.
So I believe that sound healing and breath work is something that anyone can do. And also your intention. What is your intention? What is it that you are seeking? Are you seeking clarity? Are you seeking calm, peace? But we can't do that unless we're present in this moment. And just taking the time to do that is so very important to our growth as spiritual beings.
Um, when I think of my own life, and it seems so simple, right? Stop, breathe, you know, get in tune, right? Um, but we're often pulled in so many different directions, right? And again, we have to force ourselves, or I have to force myself, I should say, into that space where I do recognize my breathing, and I recognize that it's fast and shallow, right? Instead of deep and strong, or whatever those processes are. But what about people that are, dealing with something really difficult? People that are dealing with really strong emotions, emotions like joy, anger, I'm not joy, but things like anger and sadness or depression, you know, these must carry some form of vibration. Do you feel that when you're working with people? Are you able to tell the difference in, where they are? I mean, first of all, let's just go back for a second to what it is that you do. So you bring someone in, and what is that practice like? What are some of the things, if you were working with somebody that came in, they were in a very low resonant state? What are some of the things that you would do in order to help them with that process? Would it start with breath work and then move into some sound work, or how does that even work?
So when I have a private client come in to see me, I kind of ask them some questions about, why they're here, what do they hope to gain from working with me, and what it is that what is the goal? What are
Mhm.
we doing here? And so for me, because I am an empath, I can feel things, or I have sort of thoughts that kind of shoot into my brain, and I really listen, and I create a space where people can really tell me what it is that is hurting them or how they're feeling. And I do like a body scan. Basically, I have them lie down and I sort of try to feel my way through. And normally my clients work with me for a while, and we create routines. So we'll create like a gratitude journal, or we will create a morning routine and an evening routine. I do inner child work as well, which has been very, very successful with my clients. We do meditations. So sometimes it'll be like what they're looking for. I give people homework.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I would love to point out with working with me, and there is so much truth to vibration and flow and allowing and listening, but there is also accountability.
Mm.
There is also the wanting to do it, because you can sit and, kind of be like, oh, life is happening, but you really have to take accountability for your life. One of the things that I always tell every single one of my clients is I've got good news and bad news. And I'm like, which one do you want first? And most people be like, give me the bad news. I'm like, well, the bad news is, you're responsible for your life. No matter what happens, you're still responsible. And I said, okay, what's the good news? The good news is the same.
Mm.
And the reason I tell people that is because I'm getting them out of that sort of victim mentality of that, oh, poor me, why did this happen to me? Because I've been there. I'll be straight up with you. There were times when I felt sorry for myself, and I felt like, why is this happening to me? And then once I changed my mindset, once I shifted that to what is this teaching me,
Mm.
right? What am I supposed to learn from this? How did I bring this situation on to myself? And once I started taking responsibility for my life, taking accountability for my life, then that's really when the shift begins. So you can do breath work and sound healing. But if you don't take responsibility for your life, nothing will change. Because I can bring you all of the love and compassion and, sacred space, but you have to take responsibility for your life. You have to be accountable, and you have to do it even when you don't feel like it. And that's where the discipline comes in, because you're not always going to feel motivated. You're not always going to feel motivated to do yoga. You're not always going to feel motivated to breathe. You're not always going to feel motivated to even go to a sound bath because you want to sit and watch Netflix. But is that going to help you? No, it's not. So really being accountable of your life and of what you're doing, and having the discipline to integrate these practices into your life is your responsibility. So when you do work with me, I do give you homework. We sign a contract, and it's effort from both of us.
Yeah.
So this is the commitment I have to your healing journey. Are you committed to your healing journey as well?
Yeah, I work with dogs, and it's really the same type of thing, consistency and congruency, right? And I tell people, interestingly, the exact same thing. I say, if I come to you and your dog, acts totally different than when you're trying to interact with your dog, then, the problem is you, right? If the dog acts differently with me than he does with you, then the problem is the person that's handling the dog. But that is also the power, because it means if you change, if you do some things differently, then your dog is not broken. You don't have to give up your dog. You don't have to rehome your dog. You don't have to do all these different types of things. You can just begin this practice. And I know sometimes I'll sit down with people, and as I'm talking to them, you see their mouth moving. They're just totally bought in. They're ready to go. And, those are the people that when you see them 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, the dog has transformed. And then there are other people where they're just kind of not doing it. They got their arms crossed, and they're telling you why this other person said that and that other person said that. And you come back after 3 or 4 weeks, and the dog is the same. So I think you hit on a really interesting point, is that we have to take that accountability. We have to understand that we're building. From what I can hear, you're saying we're building something. And in the process of building that, we have to have a foundation, and then we have to build a structure, and then we have to put a roof over the top of that. And you're the architect, you're supplying the materials, but the person has to go through the hard work of showing up daily and doing these practices and becoming aware. And that in itself, I don't know if you want to touch on this, but it seems like that mindset is even a frequency change, right? It seems like even just going from, I talked a little bit about the person that's in depression, the person that's in anger, that those heavy energies, and then being able to migrate to some of those lighter energies. It's a choice, and sometimes it's easier than others. But again, is there a difference in frequency of those?
Well, absolutely. And I believe that people who, that are stuck in anger or stuck in grief, listen to them. A lot of times they're blaming everyone else. A lot of times it's so and so's fault. It was because of, the way I was raised, or, my significant other, or my kid. Or they never really take the time to kind of look at themselves. And that's what we call, shadow work. And it's so incredibly important to for us to take accountability, for us to look at ourselves. One of the things that I love telling my clients also is, the magic that you're seeking inside of you, what you're looking exteriorly, what you're, looking on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Honestly, that magic is inside of you, but it is also in the work that you have been avoiding. It
Mm,
is in that, time of not wanting to see, not wanting to acknowledge, hey, I've got some skin in this,
mm,
right? And once you start to acknowledge those things, all of a sudden everything begins to change. All of a sudden your frequency gets lighter. You start to vibrate higher. You're in a state of gratitude. Another thing that I notice a lot of times with people who come in and they're in victimhood, they're not thankful for anything ever, even the smallest thing. They're not ever grateful, or they're great even if they get a new car, let's say, and they're like all about this new car and oh my god, this is my dream car. I'm telling you, those people in a week, yeah, it's not as good as I thought, or this car, that's because we can't buy happiness, but
Right.
also not being grateful. One of the things that I believe is accountability, presence, and gratitude changes it all. Because once you realize that all you have is this very moment, you're grateful, right? Once you take accountability for your life, oh my God, it gives you so much because you're like, wait a minute, I'm in charge. I am co-creating with God. I can make my life better. I'm not a victim of circumstance. I'm not a victim of what's happening around me. I can actually create my life. What's more exciting than that? So joy and freedom, those vibrations start to come in because you start taking accountability, you are in the present moment, and you are grateful. And a lot of times when I work with my clients, it is every single day, three things you are grateful for. That's kind of where we start. Three things that you are grateful for. And then also having grace with ourselves, and what are three things that you like about yourself?
Mm.
And really kind of building on those things. So many of my clients, they started their own businesses, they went into their passion, they've changed their relationships with their kids and their spouses. It's a really beautiful, beautiful practice. And I'm so blessed that I get to bring breath and sound to others so they can take accountability for their lives and in turn create the beautiful life that they've always dreamed of.
I think there would appear to be different levels of people and their ability. It's like dogs, I guess, and their ability to be in gratitude and to not be in gratitude. We talked about it a little bit earlier. There's a lot of conditioning that goes on. So maybe some of that early childhood stuff, we become a little pessimistic. Enough things don't go right for us, and we're so young and so impressionable. How could it possibly be my fault? But I also recognize, someone told me once that even if 99% of it is not your fault, 1% of it is. And I was like, what are you talking about? And really what it boiled down to is it's the 1% that you won't let go of, right? It's the 1% that you keep dragging with you through your experience. But again, as I said, I think there's some varying levels because I've met some people that naturally seem to be able to go into gratitude. And I don't know if that's just a natural gift or if it's just something they had at that point in the relationship when I met them. But there are other people that have a really hard problem. They just are extremely pessimistic about everything, and what is it that if yeah, obviously we're just having a conversation. You probably don't know, the scientific thing for it or the psychological thing for it, but in your opinion, you know, what is it that makes certain people really struggle with accountability and other people seem to somehow just naturally have that process?
Well, I grew up in a very sort of pessimistic household, um, I may be one of those people who kind of naturally was not like that, but I think that what happens is things start not going the way people want things to go. And so I think it's kind of like you said, like we have this idea of, you grow up, you go to school, you get a job, and you get married or whatever, and we're all supposed to be married by a certain time or whatever. There's like these little milestones, and it's so you got divorced, or your spouse was cheating on you, or you're not really happy with your job or whatever, and you just start to think that everything sucks. And I think that once you have that mindset, that's the hardest, because then if that's your vibration, then guess what? Like I always say, the universe says yes. So if you start thinking that, the universe says, yep, you're right. Yep, you're right. And then everything just starts to not be what you want it to be. And energy grows with what we pay attention to, right? So
Hmm.
if you're focused on the bad, if you're focused on all the things that you don't have, then you're just going to kind of swim in that. And Dr. Wayne Dyer, he was kind of the catalyst for me when he talked about everything changes with the way that you see it. I
Hmm.
think I know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I know I didn't say that correctly, but really it's about perspective. And so when things don't go my way, or there's disappointment in my life, or when I'm like, oh man, I really thought I was gonna, book that, or I really thought this was gonna happen. Um, I always kind of, again, I go back to my heart and I say, okay, and I begin to trust. And I also think that a lot of negative or people do not have that spiritual connection.
Mm.
You know, I I really believe that once you allow that spiritual connection, how can you say God's not wrong? The universe isn't wrong. So when something doesn't go your way, it's just redirection. All it is just, the old saying again, one door closes, another door opens. Now, it not may not open right away. It may not open when you want it to open, and it might not be the door you're thinking you want. But if you just allow yourself to be in the presence of God, if you just allow yourself to listen, your life will start steering you where you're supposed to go, where you're supposed to be. But you really, again, you have to allow and get yourself out of that victim, depressive, sort of angry vibration. And again, I believe that through breath and through sound and through meditation, even for 5 minutes every morning, if you implement a discipline for 5 minutes every morning, you wake up, you take that breath air, you take that breath in, right? You thank you, God. Just start saying that in the morning. Thank you, God. Breathe in, release. Thank you.
Mm.
Just that moment, things will start to change. Things will begin to shift. You'll start seeing a shift. You'll start actually looking forward to putting your hand on your heart and breathing in and saying thank you. Things will start to shift, because that's the vibration that you're emitting. That's the vibration that you're putting out there. Everything is vibration, everything is energy.
I mean, you said a lot there. The conscious contact, I think you just lit up a part of my brain, I think, because I think that is so true. I think if you don't have some form of conscious contact, some form of religious practice, that you do some belief, some faith that things are going to be working out, then it's easy to kind of tumble into that pessimistic mindset. It's easy then to align your frequency sort of with nothing. It's like your compass is just spinning and you don't know which way's east, west, north, south. And Wayne Dyer was a huge part of my awakening as well. Years ago, I heard him on Coast to Coast, which is a conspiracy radio station in the Bay Area. It's all over, actually, but um, and yeah, and I remember him saying that on the radio too. What you said, he said something like, "You won't." Uh, you won't believe it till you see it. You have to change that to you'll see it when you believe it, right? So we have to have some form of belief that, my friend Candace, in an interview that I had with her, she said life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you, right? It's here, it's the grist, and we've got to take it, and we've got, it's the clay, we've got to mold it, we've got to shape it into what it is. And again, going back to your situation, all of those things happening, the pessimistic person just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. They don't say, I'm going on a spiritual journey. They say, get out the shovels. You know what I mean? Like we're just gonna dig this sucker until we can't dig anymore. And so the ability to turn one's life around, does, I believe, as well have to do with some form of higher power, some form of belief that things are happening, that they're being orchestrated, that I may not see it right now, but it is for my best good if I just, sort of keep going. And you're talking about gratitude, which is a mental thing. You're talking about breath, which is sort of that physical process that we're going through. And then, the sound frequencies, which again, I think at a maybe a cellular level, I'm not exactly sure where that process happens, but you're just really attacking all those areas that we so often will just dismiss. We don't put any time, we don't put any energy into what we're thinking, how we're feeling, how we're breathing, our diet, our energy level. We once the spiral begins, it's just very easy to, I guess you would say, just neglect all of those things. And so you're really bringing all those things together in this really kind of cool way. You're giving someone tools. You're not just saying, hey, think happy, write on a piece of paper. It's like, yes, write that on a piece of paper, but understand why you're writing it. Believe that what you're writing is true, that you can co create this process, that God has your best good. Now, change your body, change your posture, change your breathing habits, get out of that fight flight and get into that relaxed allowing, that space where things can come in, and then surround yourself with things that are pleasant, sound vibrations. We talked a little bit about, we were talking about music. You hear that song and you're not sad before you hear that song, but then you hear it and you remember that heartbreak. You hear that song from Fleetwood Mac, Don't Stop Believing, or Journey, like I know whenever I hear those particular songs, something happens inside of me. I go back to my childhood, or I go back to dating someone in the past, or just a point in my life, music just, and that's that frequency. And we talked a little bit about that before, but I just want you to go into that a little bit, how things like music can actually affect who we are.
Well, music, so sound, the thing about sound is it kind of just it helps us to regulate our nervous system, basically. Breathwork and sound healing, they both help to regulate our nervous system, which is helps us, helps us internally. It gets us out of our minds and sort of into our hearts. And when you're in a meditation, I always say meditation is allowing. It's allowing source to communicate,
Mm,
communicate with you. And so what it does, breath and sound, is it just gets you out of your mind. It really helps you get out of your mind. I started this journey teaching meditation, and that's where I noticed that people were like shallow breathing, or you would hear like I just can't, I can't stop my mind. I can't stop my mind. And so we would do like candle meditations where you would like look at the focus of the flame and to try to kind of clear out all the noise and all the baggage, and that works great. But if you just allow yourself to lie down, to breathe intentionally, focusing on your breath, allowing your body to fully relax, sink into the ground, and just be allowing the vibrations of the sound to move the energy out of your body so you can receive.
mm,
Because what happens is We cannot receive if we're cluttered up, right? If we're, our brain is going and our bodies are cluttered. So we just allow ourselves to be open and allow the vibration, those frequencies to actually move that energy out of our bodies through the breath as well. We release through breath. I mean, we lose weight through breath. You know what I
Mm.
feel like?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when I always love to breathe in love, breathe in that love, breathe in that light, breathe in gratitude.
Mm.
Breathe in that energy and release with the exhale loudly with a sigh, releasing stress, releasing pain, releasing trauma, releasing worry. You can actually help heal your body of physical symptoms. We know that with Reiki and energy work. And
Mm.
so you can literally sit and imagine the pain in your body leaving your body through your exhale. That's amazing. God gave us all these amazing tools to help heal ourselves because I am not a healer. I don't heal you. I am the guide.
Mm.
I create the space for you to heal yourself. And that's where the intention and the accountability come in. I can only provide tools. I can only provide space. I can only provide, my intention. But I cannot heal you. You heal yourself. And through breath and sound, it is a beautiful, beautiful combination. And I find that people are really, really responsive. They feel great. They feel creative. They feel excited about whatever project they're working on. And I have helped others to change their negative attitude, to release grief, to accept. One of my very, very favorite quotes is suffering is not accepting what is. And
Mm.
it's so powerful to me because that is what suffering is. It's when we're, oh, I didn't want that, or it shouldn't be this way, or why did they do that? Instead of just accepting what is, there's so much freedom in that. Just accept what is. You can't change anyone. You can't heal anyone. You cannot make anyone do what they are not willing to do. All
Yeah.
we can do is create space to have love, empathy, and compassion.
It makes a lot of sense, right? Because like that is acceptance is the solution to all of our problems, right? I'm in recovery, so that's one of the things that we always would talk about. You would go to these meetings and you would do this work and you come to realize, I'm the creator of most of my problems and I have to take accountability for those things. And then I have to accept the world on the world's terms, right? I have to deal with life on life's terms, right? And I love what you said, because I think that was Buddha's whole thing is the root of all misery is the desire for things to be different, right? Is it's not the way, and we could do that. We don't have to be Buddhists. I can do this myself. I could just be like, I know better than God knows, right? And that's ridiculous. It's crazy because I don't know. I can't control other people, places, or things. So I have to be able to control that inner world that is responding to those things. And then, as you said, once we do that, I believe it's much easier for us to have an enjoyable life, to be able to, appreciate all of those things that are happening around us. So I'm curious about your own, you deal with a lot of different people, you deal with a lot of different energies. Some of them must weigh you down. Some people must be very difficult. As a dog trainer, believe me, I know some are very easy clients, and some of them you're just like, oh my God, when is this 6 weeks going to end? But I'm curious about your own spiritual practice, with helping other people, like I said, and maybe even kind of absorbing, even though we're not therapists in some way, we're trying to help somebody. We get invested with them, we get entangled in their energy. How do you ground yourself? How do you make sure that you can stay aligned? And do you have any personal, I love what you talked about with the candle work, and all of these things are so counterintuitive, because I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I need to for this thing, because I would go to some of these places and you'd see people, you go to these fairs and different types of things, and you see people and they've got all these candles, and it's just, you just like walk by them. You see all these crystals and you just walk by them. You see prayer beads and you see this and you see that. But each of those things has so much power if we just choose to use them, to believe in them, to attune our frequency, that they have benefit in our life. And so again, I know I'm a little bit off on a tangent, but I was saying I loved what you were talking about with the candle work and things like that. So in your own practices, how do you nourish your spirit? How do you keep connected to your purpose, and not sort of get you know dragged into that draining of your energy?
Well, first of all, grounding is really important. And I think being in nature is really important. That's really helpful for me. I practice yoga at least, 5 days a week, and that is so important for my practice. That is how I sort of fill my cup. And then I I practice breath work and sound healing. Every morning, I take a deep breath and I say thank you, and I journal, and I sit around my bowls and light sage and breathe and play and sit in meditation for at least an hour every morning before I go to yoga. And it has really helped me to connect. And I talk to my spirit guides. I am a huge advocate of connecting to your angels and to your spirit guides, and I speak to them plainly. I'm like, look, what's going on, like, I'm very frank. And when I'm angry or sad, I'll say, like, what, I know that I'm supposed to be thankful. I know that I am supposed to trust, but I don't get what's happening right now. Please help me understand. You know, as a guide, as a healer, my life is not perfect. I'm not grateful for every single thing, but I do know that when I am disappointed, I bring myself back. And I think that, I just bring myself back. Sometimes, seriously, I'll just go outside barefoot and put my feet in the grass just because I'm like, I need to ground. I'm upset or I'm feeling anxious. I just need to ground. I just need a moment. I just need to put my hands on my heart and take a deep breath in through my nose and out through my mouth, and just remember to be grateful. Remember that I don't have all the answers and I don't know everything, and I am looking to source to help me. And that is basically what I do on the daily. And and also, if it's like my plants, I are very soothing to me. I play my sound bowls for my plants. They seem to grow beautifully because they love the sound. And so I really take my own self-care very seriously. Doing this work, I am really lucky because I'm one of those people who actually feels invigorated afterwards. So after I do a sound bath, I am on cloud nine. I feel invigorated. I am so excited that people were here, and even if it's just one person, I'm one of these people. I'm very blessed in that way. I don't really feel drained um, from my work at all. I actually feel invigorated afterwards.
Yeah, it's funny because you talked about the plants behind you, and it's important that you say you actually do what it is that you're helping other people do, right? Because you
Oh
practice what you
yeah.
preach, and so that going into that practice, some people will say, well, there's no way I could take an hour to do this. And I don't think it has to be an hour. What you're saying is 3 breaths. What you're saying is just be intentional. If you're at a stop sign somewhere, if you're in the middle of a lunch break or whatever, it's oftentimes people will just say they don't have time, but they do. They just, like you said, they're watching Netflix in the bathroom on their half-hour break or whatever it is, right? And so, I think that's kind of important that you are nourishing. And if I looked at you and in the background there you had a bunch of dead plants and one cactus, you know what I mean, like one brown, you know cucumber cactus or pickled cactus or whatever it is, then you'd be like, holy smokes. But it makes sense. You're feeling that gratitude, you're invigorated, you're playing that sound, and in that environment, those plants are thriving around you. And that kind of tells us about our own self, right? Or how we would be if we were a plant, whether we would be dry and droopy or whether we would be invigorated and strong. You do blend in a lot of different things in your spiritual practices: Reiki healing, yoga, breath work, sound healing. You've walked a lot of different paths, and we're just going to touch on this really quickly. A lot of these things would be considered new agey. You talk about spirit guides and things like that. And some people might not resonate with that. I myself, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus, but I'm not a Christian like most Christians. I believe in the red letters of what Jesus said, and I read, the book of John or whatever, because I really believe that it's about accepting people. It's about not judging other people, right? It says, don't judge lest you be judged. And yet, what do? We run around and we say, you're wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong. If something is happening, if some new age principles are really helping somebody, if they're in a state of depression, if they're maybe going to commit suicide and they find healing through sound bowls, or they find healing through oracle cards or tarot cards, or whatever the situation is, I'm kind of all for that. My journey is my own personal journey. My relationship with my higher power is my relationship with my higher power. And I don't judge other people for whatever it is that they do. That's why I have these conversations, because I'm really fascinated. I want to get to know people. I don't want to get to know systems. I'm not interested in systems, structures, things of that nature. I'm interested in, this person was doing this, and then they did this and it really, really helped. Wow. That's biotechnology, right? They took some information in, they applied it, and it changed their life. And those are the types of things I'm interested in. But I wanted to ask you, is there a place, because there oftentimes are people that are just like, no, that's bad, that's this, that's that, you only have to trust in God, and you shouldn't do all these other things. Is there a place for new age practices and sort of religious beliefs? And I'll use Christianity, or Buddhists don't have as much of a problem with it, but Judaism, whatever it is. Is there a place where those things can merge, or is it something where those things are just sort of mutually on each side of the room?
I do believe that they can merge, and this is why. And I believe in God. I have always believed in God, and I believe that God created the tools for us. So
Mm,
if you look at a beautiful crystal, um, this is an amethyst, right? And this hasn't been treated. This is from the earth. It's been polished, but this is from the earth. And grounding outside in the dirt from the earth are plants from the earth. God gave us our intuition to help us. I cannot tell you how many times I have saved myself from a dangerous situation because I listened to my little voice that I believe
mm.
God gave me, right? And so I do think that there is a place. God created sound. God created sounds, the birds chirping, the ocean, that is sound healing.
Mm.
Those vibrations move through us, right? You go to the beach, you just listen to the ocean waves. God did that. So I absolutely believe that there is a place where we can meld this together. Jesus was about acceptance, about kindness, about helping each other, about feeding the poor, about love, about compassion. These are all things that are implemented in this, I guess, new age realm. But when you really think about it, it's all the same, is it not?
Yeah.
Isn't love universal? Acceptance universal? I don't align with guilt and shame. Those are two, I believe, very detrimental ways of being. Shaming someone into doing something, or using fear or guilt. That is not, I don't believe that is the way, personally. And I believe that there will be a time when all of us can coexist, and our religion, for a lot, is love and kindness and beauty. These judgmental sort of dogmas, I that is not for me. And everyone has a right to believe whatever it is that they want to believe. But I believe that God and Jesus Christ were all accepting, all knowing, and all loving.
Yeah. And when you talk about accountability, I mean, that's what it boils down to. I have to be accountable to my own beliefs and not the beliefs of other people. You know, I look at Jesus and I'm like, okay, he had a prostitute with him, a tax collector. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Oh
he's
yeah.
with the lepers. He's knocking over tables in the religious temple. He's
Absolutely.
explaining that, it's really about the relationship to God. The kingdom of God is within, and he says love is the highest of all the commandments, right? And yet somehow, somewhere along the way, we just kind of lose track of that. So, and again, I'm the same way as you. Anyone can believe whatever they want to believe. I choose to, I accept Jesus, and I think that people trying to live a life of the highest good and of help to other people and to a particular standard, but I also believe, like you, shame is a very low frequency. These are very low frequencies that are utilized, whether we know it or not, when groups of people get together and ostracize other groups of people. As long as I am not for like, hey, let's run around and cut people's heads off and do all this other kind of stuff, right? Like we have to. There's a point where I go, no, 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 that's not what I'm talking about. But but in terms of, I just like Martin Luther King. Let's get to know somebody based on their character. I'm not, in Ireland, and I don't mean to get any Irish people upset, but the Irish, the Catholics fighting against the Protestants, or the Muslims fighting against the Christians, or this or that. It's just, to me, it just goes so far away from the message, and again, that message is we have here, we have now, we could be fighting and killing each other, or we could be celebrating and loving one another. And it seems like the world would be a better place if we were celebrating and loving one another, right? Than if we were in constant turmoil. But that's kind of where we are. And I think that's what this whole conversation has been about. Somewhere along the way, we kind of got hijacked, we kind of got busy, and we lost track of who we were. And what you're trying to do is you're really trying to help people stop, take a moment, appreciate, have gratitude, remember, right? Come back together, remember who you were, right? You've created, I think, a really beautiful space, and I really appreciate you coming and having this conversation. For anybody watching today who feels lost or they're disconnected from that truth that we've been talking about, what's one thing that you would say to them if you had one opportunity, you were going to meet them at a bus stop somewhere and you were never going to see them again, right? But you had one thing that you could tell them, one practice that they might start, one step that they could take along the journey. What would that be?
Um, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is to kind of, put your hands on your heart, connect with yourself, take a deep breath in, um, and be thankful for this moment. So that's something that I think will change people. Put your hands on your heart, take a deep breath in, a deep belly breath, release, and say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's so fantastic. Okay, so where can people find out more about what it is that you're doing? What social media do you have? What kind of events? I know you're going to be in Thousand Oaks, so I,
Yeah.
enthusiastically encourage people to go out there. But yeah, how do people get a hold of you, and what types of things are you doing?
So I am doing an intentional alignment sound bath at a crystal shop named Sage Spirits in Thousand Oaks, California. We have been doing sound baths there for almost 2 years. They tend to sell out, and we have a really wonderful growing community there. It's really beautiful. My website is breathandsound.net. And I'm on Instagram at I am Alana Tracy. And you can find out all of the events that I'm doing. I work with people one on one, either whether it's in person or through Zoom. And you'll see me around. I really love what I'm doing, and I feel so blessed to be living this beautiful life. And breath and sound is where it's at.
There you go.
It's where it's at. It absolutely is where it's at. And it doesn't take a lot. It just takes your intention and really your commitment to yourself. And the other thing is, when you heal yourself, you heal everyone around you. So instead of pointing the finger at everybody else, take a look inside. Start doing the work. Start really looking at yourself. You lead by example. Your kids are watching, your spouse is watching. And really, like I said earlier, the magic that you're seeking, whatever it is that you think is going to fill you up, because it's not a new car and it's not a new house, I'll tell you that right now. Um, that magic, whatever you're seeking, it's in the work that you're avoiding. And just remember that. So just take a deep breath, put your hands on your heart, breathe in, and say thank you.
Well, thank you so much. You have to watch. I'm releasing a video today that you literally just said about six things in, and it's based on that same premise. You're not your job, you're not your car, you're not what society wants you to be. Take the time, slow down, do the inner work, have some accountability. So it's crazy that you're even saying those things, but I will be posting it up later on tonight. So Alana Tracy, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the invitation. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for taking your pain, your sorrow, and showing people that that is the fertile ground for growth if they choose it to be. So I really do appreciate you. And yeah, thank you so much for coming out today and sharing some space and some time.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much.